All right. Well, I am with Denise Thompson here. She's a rancher in Broadwater County, and we're going to be talking about some of the laws and just the ways of life around ranching, and that people need to be necessarily aware of when they move to Montana. Because there's a lot of things I think people just flat don't understand. They think they want to move to Montana, but they don't understand how to deal with the parts of Montana that they actually like. Yeah. So, I'm going to start with just asking you a few questions. I mean, you just got here. We didn't talk about anything before, so we can kind of be a little bit, whatever it would call natural or whatever, except for the fact that you have a camera in your face and you're on a microphone.
And I'm stuck in this shed.
Stuck in this shed. Did you want some coffee, by the way? Did you drink coffee? Okay.
So thank you.
I drink coffee quite a bit,
okay,
especially in here. What's like the biggest issue you deal with as far as people moving in around you as a rancher, and what kind of interaction problems that you see happening? Are there any?
We used to have landowners call us all the time. Hey, your cows are on our place. And we were trying to be good neighbors, even though it wasn't our responsibility. We would go up there. It's an hour away, go up and move our cows out. But we were doing that on an almost daily basis. So we finally said, we can't do that anymore. So we will do our best to be good neighbors, but it is your responsibility. And so I think now we're kind of at a good place with those folks up in that area. And, in fact, we've had some that say, hey, we really want your cows. We really want to use cattle to come and graze.
Okay, so sorry.
Okay.
Let's go over that one more time. So we're talking about between national forest, any national forest property, and BLM property. It's the private landowner's responsibility to fence the cattle off of their land.
Exactly. And if there's already a fence there, it's their job to maintain that entire boundary fence. Now, some people are thinking, well, those cattle ranchers, they should have to do the work. I guarantee you, we do the work. We have all the interior fences that we have to maintain. And so if we share those with other permit holders on that federal land, we have to share the responsibility of all the interior fences and out of all of our own private land. So we fence a lot, and we work really hard at that. Now, do all ranchers maintain all of their fence lines? Unfortunately, no. There are even some locals that have been here for generations that really don't maintain their own fences. And a lot of people don't understand, if two private landowners share a fence line, you each are responsibility to maintain that. And usually it's kind of the code of the West that you look at the fence line from your property and you maintain from center right. The other landowner on the other side looks at the fence and he or she maintains from center right. So you basically each maintain half of it. Does that happen in the ideal world? Maybe. But in Montana, in reality, and probably everywhere else, no. In fact, we generally maintain all the fences around our personal property because we often don't have neighbors to do that. Do we hate the neighbors for it? No.
I know other ranchers do the same thing.
Yeah.
It's like this rancher maintains almost all the fence because the other ranchers don't maintain any of it. And so a lot of this comes down in my mind to somebody when they purchase property. I see this. I'm getting this mindset. I do a lot of videos on TikTok about this kind of subject, and some of the mindset is that I own this property. I can do whatever I want with it. But I think that's a misconception. You can't murder or do something else that's against the law just because you own the property.
Right. And as I had mentioned to you another time when we were talking, we're actually addressing a massive subdivision that's coming into our area. Does that private landowner have every right to develop a subdivision and do what he wants on his property? Absolutely. In fact, Montanans are probably as passionate about private property rights as anyone. It's a huge deal in Montana. But when that private landowner, what he or she is choosing to do has massive negative implications on the adjacent landowner's property, it becomes an issue far greater than that person's own private property rights. And so there's a balance, there's a discussion, there's transparency, there's respect, There's understanding the laws, especially if you're wanting to, one, create a subdivision, or two, buy property, either on a subdivision or just that's available. And that person has the obligation, and the onus of responsibility is on that person. When and if they buy that land, what are my responsibilities? And we're not even talking water.
Well,
Wait till we get into water.
I was going to talk about that. But, the other thing, you started talking about it a little bit, is like, if somebody is wanting to come here to Montana and they're looking at a piece of property to buy, I mean, what is it? Is there some advice you can give them on what do you look for first? I mean, what do you have to be aware of when you're trying to buy a piece of property?
Sure. I would say the very first thing, because we had a person buy some property near us from Florida, loves Montana. One is, why do you love Montana? Why are you moving here?
Ask yourself that question. Yeah.
And and I guarantee you your answer is open space, freedom, the beauty of our natural, amazing resources. So don't come here and change that. That doesn't mean you're not welcome here.
Right.
But don't come here and change that, because that's what we're trying to preserve. And one of those big things, other than your fencing and being a good neighbor, spraying your weeds, keeping a healthy ecosystem on your property. And if it's not healthy, what can I do to make it better? And understanding that just because you have a stream running through your property doesn't mean you can build a pond, doesn't mean you can put a pump in the creek, doesn't mean you can divert the water and irrigate everything that you want to irrigate. In fact, most likely you would be in violation if you did that. And a lot of people don't understand that. So what are your legal water rights? What are you allowed to do? How can you work with your neighbor that probably does have a water right and a diversion point for an irrigation ditch, and understand that that neighbor basically is grandfathered in and can do what he needs to do to maintain his irrigation system, even if it is on your property. That's ag related, but then there's also things that people don't understand. When you go to build a home or to buy a lot or create a subdivision, you have a lot of leeway to do that and to, for example, put in a well. And it's called an exempt well because it's under, if I recall correctly, like 10 acre feet as far as the flow.
Right.
Well, if I was a rancher and I'm going, heck, I've got this big, huge field and I want to irrigate it, can I go put a well in to run a pivot? I cannot. I am, at least in Broadwater County, I will not be permitted to do that because we're considered a closed basin. And no more water developments can be made if they're over that exempt well status. So there are a lot of people that are either native to Montana or that already own lands or have water rights. They're really concerned about the fact that there's can be a lot of development for residential and a lot of wells for those, but not for agriculture. So is there a risk of agriculture being negatively impacted? Very strong risk, because if you put in a lot of wells, you will have a negative impact on the aquifer, which will then affect other neighbors and other uses of that water. So that's kind of a hot topic right now that's going on, not only in our county, but actually around the nation, because there's been so much drought in the West.
Yeah, water's a big deal. And some of the stuff a lot of the stuff you're talking about is not, I think sometimes that agriculture or ranching gets a bad rap for things that they have no responsibility for. The laws that you're talking about, like you can't build a pond on your creek, has nothing to do with agriculture. Really, it has to do with like the EPA and the Bureau of Reclamation and organizations that actually are trying to protect the land from being overdeveloped without the proper. So it doesn't have anything to do with like neighbors not wanting it. It's like, that's actually, if you come there, you made a good point. You come here because of these certain things. There's laws in place to try to keep it that way.
Exactly.
And actually, I believe that one thing that ranchers and farmers don't get credit for is actually making a way to leave the land the way it is.
Exactly. I'm super passionate about that. Why would a farmer and a rancher do something that would inhibit or destroy the very thing that they need? And that's a healthy environment and a healthy natural resources. And there's probably no one that's a better steward of that, because granted, there are some that could do far better, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
But most they are taking the steps that they can to improve their lands and their resources because they need to survive and to hopefully thrive, because it's a really hard way to make a living. And so it's vital that we do that because we can't destroy that very thing that we need.
Right. Because I took somebody up to this pristine area that's owned by a rancher. I mean, it's gorgeous up in Pole Creek. And he's like, well, I don't feel sorry for the rancher now, because this is amazing. I would love to live here. And I said, that's exactly right. Because the rancher owns it, there is no house sitting here. So it looks like this. If you owned it, you'd put a house here immediately. So the only way it stays looking like it does is because a rancher owns it.
Right.
And I think that gets lost in like, oh, the ranchers owned all this property. But they do preserve and protect it in a lot of different ways. I mean,
exactly. And a lot of the rangeland has little use other than for the cattle to utilize that and make it healthier. And of course, for the wildlife. And ranchers want wildlife. Farmers want wildlife. We just need a balance. We need healthy management. Most are for protecting those wild animals, but also utilizing those wild animals. And it's, I think some folks come from this utopia sense of reality, and others come from this kind of hard, realistic sense of reality, and there's a lot in between. And the only way that there can be kind of understanding and respect is to sit down and actually talk about it. And we love to bring people to our ranch that don't know anything about ranch life and explain why we believe what we believe, how it's worked in our case for 7 generations on our ranch, what we're trying to do better. And we want to listen to those folks and their opinion, their beliefs. But the reality is, this is what's happening. And this is what we're going to have to do. Otherwise, we're going to lose that. And it's so important for people to communicate that, and ranchers and farmers are pretty quiet.
They're very quiet.
Yeah, they're so focused. I mean, one, your workload is just astronomical. And two, they're generally a really quiet, non-confrontational type people. And so, they don't fight. They don't fight this. And it's really not a fight. It's more of an understanding of what can we do. I just want to kind of jump back. We talked about ponds. A person can build a pond, but you have to go through the permit process.
Right. Yeah.
It's not. I also work at the conservation district, and that's one of the things that we supply permits for. And I work for a board of elected officials. Most of them are farmers and ranchers. We want people to be able to do work on their streams. We even okay mining activity, but they have to fill out an application and a permit form and go through the proper procedures. And that's all we're asking them to do. And yes, it is on your private property, but as you said so well, these things are in place to protect those resources, which is why these people are coming here, because they love those resources, and we do too.
Exactly.
But we have to be wise. We have to be good stewards. And I think there's a responsible way to use those resources while also protecting them.
Yeah. And I think people have to understand what land ownership is. I mean, you're not buying like your own country. You're buying a piece of property. You're buying the right to do specific things on a piece of property.
Right.
Right. And so there's responsibility with that, not just freedom to do whatever you want.
Exactly.
And it's very nice to talk to you about these kind of things, because I don't have to ask you a whole bunch of questions. You're very good at, conversation wise. So talking about, let's go back to the fence in and out thing for a minute, and then we'll go on to another topic that I have. But so when a person buys a piece of property, I guess let's explain the rights that they have, as far as they have the right to fence the cattle out, basically. That's a right of theirs.
Right.
But if a cow comes on their property, some people have said this in the comments of my videos, that we'll just kill it and eat beef. Have you heard something like that before? Yeah. And so, I mean, are you aware of exactly what happens if somebody shoots one of your cows if it comes on their property?
Well, if we can prove that happened, they are facing a lot of legal issues with that. That's illegal. And we've had threats of that being done. We actually ended up one year in the fall when we gathered, we were short 10 cows, never did find them, never could prove what happened to them. Did they just die? potentially, but that's a huge number. Usually we're only short a couple every fall.
Right.
So we do have a pretty good idea what happened, but we can't prove it. And so you just kind of go on. Now, generally, a lot of the people that we deal with, they'll call and say, hey, at least in our case, they'll say, hey, your cows are on our place. Sometimes they will, try to get them out, but most often we go get them out. Have we kind of created a monster there by us having to drive an hour to get our cows out? Probably. But do those people most of the time know how to get a cow out? Maybe not. And so in our case, we would kind of rather be the ones in charge of, yes, we'll get them out. We will put them where they need to be. And we try to do that on a real timely basis, unless this happened to me last year. I had a person say, hey, Denise, are your cows in my pasture? And I said, they could be. And I said, as soon as if they are ours, this is our brand. This is our tag color.
Right.
This is our ear marking. If they are our cows, we will get them out as soon as you fix your fence, because it won't do us any good to get them out because they'll be right back in. And this is a private landowner that was raised in agriculture, and she was not happy. And
I know. Yeah, I just last year we had something like that happen just behind me here. And this is like a person who's a big landowner,
right?
Still, they don't want to.
Yeah, and I said, you're speaking to the choir. So we work a lot. We work really hard on fences. As soon as you do your part, we will do our part, and we'll gladly do that, because we don't want to be rude and obnoxious and disrespectful to your land, because we don't want somebody to do that to us. But you've got to do your part. It's not our job to do your part.
And there's kind of you mentioned it as code of the West. It's kind of like an etiquette that you learn growing up in agriculture, is like who's responsible for what. Like I'm responsible for this part of the fence and that part of the fence. And I think where we've talked about farmers ranchers kind of being silent, I think really where they're silent is not in educating people.
Exactly.
Because when they don't talk about it, people don't even know what they're dealing with. They buy a piece of property and they're like, oh, what? It can't do this?
Right.
And it's actually, I would say, it's actually on them when you're buying a piece of property. That's what's called due diligence. You look into, like, what am I signing here? But, we don't look at all the papers we sign when we do that kind of thing.
And I think it's the realtor's responsibility, too.
To mention a lot of that stuff.
Exactly. Yes. And honestly, there's probably some realtors are like, I just want to sell this place. Okay, great. But be open and frank and upfront and transparent with what that entails.
Yeah.
Because then you're going to have a happier landowner anyway, or property owner.
Oh, absolutely.
That's how I feel about it. We had another situation last year where our cows got off the forest, somehow got through the fence onto this private land, had a beautiful pond, and broke his glass table. And this man came from a farm family in central Montana, and he was furious.
Really?
So he kept calling and calling and calling. So we went up a couple days later, visited with him, got the details, showed us the video. Initially, the cows weren't ours. They were somebody else's cows, but then our cows followed in.
Okay.
And so we took extra steps. We brought him an electric fence charger. We showed him how to install it, how it works, because he already had an old electric fence wiring. And he never had any problems the rest of the season. And so now this year we told him, okay, so now you can get your own electric fence charger. You know how to install it. This is what you're going to have to do to protect your property. And we have not had any trouble, and now we have kind of this respect for one another. Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. Now, there is a difference, a big difference between how somebody is able according to the law, how somebody deals with a cow, an open range, and somebody deals with a dog, open range. In Montana, I believe, like, a dog is totally different. I mean, if they come on your property, somebody's allowed to shoot them. Am I right?
I think you're probably right, especially if that dog is attacking your stock or
chasing wildlife, which is illegal.
Right. Now, you would hope that person would do his or her due diligence and get a hold of the dog owner or make that attempt.
Yes.
So that person can then, but if this becomes an ongoing issue, there's probably going to be another issue because of that. But, and I'm glad you brought up the dog topic, because I was going to actually mention this. there's kind of a code of the West on that.
Yes.
Because when you are driving on all these dirt roads around Montana, it's a given that those places often have dogs or cats or children. And so, be careful when you're driving on the road. Don't go 70 miles an hour on the dirt road. And if you see animals or, of course, children, be careful. Slow down so that hopefully you don't kill that dog. Because there's a lot of that goes on, even when those dogs aren't causing a problem and they might leave the property and get up onto the county road. But, we've faced some of those things too. But, you don't. Granted, with our neighbors, if there's an issue with their dogs or our dogs impacting the livestock, we just contact one another and get it resolved. And we've never had anything harsh or negative happen from that.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of bring it up that's
good point,
because it's a different law. I think
I think you're right.
Are you familiar with the show Yellowstone?
Yes.
Have you ever watched it?
I'm an addict.
Are you?
I'll have to admit.
Okay. It's a show that's really brought Montana onto the map. And when you watch this, you see a guy who's trying to protect his land from development. To me, that's kind of the main storyline, to keep it from development. But it's not just any land, because his daughter mentions to him, well, why don't you just sell this and move to Oklahoma and buy a big ranch where nobody cares about it, right? And it's because there's a tie that people, and in the show they're portraying this, but maybe people miss it. It's actually real. Like, people get really attached to the very land that their grandfather. Are you on a ranch now that has been passed down through generations? How many generations?
Right. Yeah, so it was homesteaded by my mother-in-law's ancestors in the late 1800s. They came over from Europe and homesteaded. And our grandchildren are the 7th generation on this ranch, or connected. 7. Connected to the ranch. And in fact, a very wise friend that we have that's a businessman, he's kind of going, you guys are crazy. Because it's so hard living. Why don't you just sell it? Just sell it. Prices are great. It's like, it's not about the money. Granted, we wish we could make more money and it wasn't so difficult to make a living as a rancher. Now, John Dutton on the Yellowstone, that's an unusual amount of money that is being portrayed for that rancher. That's not the norm for these small family ag operations.
Well, I mean, as far as he's being portrayed, it's like 200,000 acre ranch.
Right.
So it's one of the, it's huge.
Massive. Yes. Yeah. And so for many of us, that's not even close to what we deal with. And that's not the reality for a lot of these small family farms, which is what ours is. And so you do have this, it's not a duty. It's just this connection, this roots, this passion, this desire. They made it through so many hardships for so many generations. We want to continue that. And we understand the value. It's not money. It's the value of that land, that open space, what that brings to your family, to your community, to everybody. They need food, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we are helping to provide that, and that substance of what, so many people hold dear. We don't want to part with that. So it's a battle that we all face within ourselves. Do we sell? Do we change? Do we do something different? Diversify? What do we do? And so we can relate to the John Dutton situation. Now, would we use the same tactics that he's using?
Right, as far as killing people and mafia type.
Yeah.
No, but
do we have our own form of Yellowstone drama on our own ranch? Yeah. Could we have our own movie?
Does.
Yeah, we could have our own movie. So it's hard. It's hard to be in family operations, but there's some incredible beauty and fortitude and grit and grace and tremendous passion behind it. So that's why.
And it's portrayed, and I think it's true, and I state it sometimes, and I get the kind of a like, oh, I can't believe that that's true, that ranchers really aren't making much money. So but I think it's relative, right? I mean, they see you driving a nice vehicle, or having something that's nice, and they say, well, you're making a lot of money. But technically, I mean, those are tools that you have to use to get your job done. So there's a lot of things. What would you say to somebody that says, because I think people believe ranchers are very wealthy, and they are in a way.
I mean, their wealth is tied up in their property.
Right.
So the only way that they are wealthy in reality is if they sold that property, then they could have the cash. But there are many ranchers, though, that operate. They have to borrow money to operate. Now, granted, our ranch has not had to do that, and I credit my in-laws for that. They're super frugal, and they try to be super wise, and they've been through enough hardships that they know what they're not willing to have happen again. But you have to stay within the confines of the resources that you have, the monies that you have, and it's super hard, especially when fuel prices are going through the roof. To buy new equipment,
it's astronomically more than, and one of the things about that is like the price of a vehicle in the 70s.
Just a truck, yeah,
like a pickup was like $3,500, and a cow was worth, I don't know what it was worth.
I don't either.
But if you
the ratio there,
the ratio of a truck now, which is $60,000 or $70,000 or $80,000, but a cow is, I mean, literally very close to the same price.
Exactly.
I mean, it's maybe double,
maybe
from the 70s, but I'm not even sure if it's double.
I don't think so. Yeah.
So it's so out of proportion.
It is.
That now when you're talking about new vehicles and then fuel, and people don't really understand as well that fuel is such a big deal, because on land, when you're managing a piece of property like a ranch, I mean, to get from one side to the other, just to check something takes fuel.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, my husband was just talking to his folks about this the other day. He said, wait, because the fuel bill keeps coming in. He goes, wait till we start haying. We're looking at over $500 a day.
Wow.
Just to put up the hay. Then,
and that's to run all the machinery and the
right.
fuel for the machinery.
Exactly. Then you add on the fact that we are in this massive drought. Granted, the last, 4 or 5 weeks, we had some incredible rains that helped our area.
Oh, huge.
But the streams are still going to struggle. It's a guarantee. So we have a water right on the stream, but we also have a really big irrigation well that if we need to, we use it. We've been using it since May, and that costs us at least, I don't know what it costs us today, but it was costing us $2,000 a month just for the power bill. People don't understand that. So a rancher generally has one good year out of 10.
Right.
At best.
Mm-hmm.
And so you kind of, if there was a true definition of a gambler, it's a rancher and a farmer. So you live for that one good year out of 10, and the rest you kind of hang on and you just hope for that other good year. And like you said, in the 70s, the comparison between all the expenses and the value of what you were getting for your products was a lot closer. Now the only thing that's changed is the expenses have skyrocketed, and the value of our products being sold is being so controlled and manipulated that the rancher is suffering. And it's not a victimhood situation, it's a reality. Right. So, we're not sitting around, oh, poor us. We're out there working harder trying to figure out how we can change that. But oftentimes our hands are tied, and so that's why so many are selling. Plus, you've got those family farms and ranches where the generations are aging, and the younger generations are going, I don't think I want to do what Papa and Grandma did. I don't know if I want to, in some situations, suffer and really struggle. I don't know if I want that, because, we're kind of at a society where delayed gratification doesn't happen anymore. We want it now. And there's gratification in ranching, but it's in the lifestyle itself. It's not that you're not going to go camping, very much. You're not going to go to the lake every day.
You're not going to go to the lake. You're not going to, there's so much work to do all the time that you don't get to do that. So you have to have and so we're talking about something, even in the Yellowstone show, they portray this as kind of the family dynamic, right?
Right.
Like one of them wants to go off and do this, and the other one is struggling whether he wants to be on the ranch or not. And it's kind of, I think that is like the family dynamic is that is the truth of every single ranching family right now. Some of them,
Exactly.
there's very few that really want it really bad and are willing to do what it takes to
Right.
keep it. Some
Yeah.
really want it,
Mhm.
but they're not really willing to do what their parents or grandparents did, and the profit margins are less. So you're still going to have to work as hard. Just, I mean, I look in the 70s and before, and you see all these old barns and like ranch houses that were built back then were a little bit, they were getting a little bigger and
Sure.
things like
Right.
that. And now you step into and that they're the same ones.
Yeah.
Now they're just run down.
Yeah.
Over the last 40 years, nobody's built anymore because it's just gone down. The profit margin has.
Right. And so that's the case on our ranch. Our corrals are full. Water tank, having to turn water on and stand and watch the tank fill. All those things, and my husband got it. And the money and the effort, and when those money, time, and effort, the effort's there, but the money and the time isn't there because you're busy just doing the basics that you have to get done. How do we then address the improvements that need to be made? Because like you said, a lot of that stuff built back, my in-laws have a nice home. We have a decent house. We're fortunate. My husband drives a reliable pickup, but is any of it grandiose and elaborate? No, it's not. And that kind of leads into a topic probably for another day, but you've heard like succession planning or transition planning from one generation to the next. It's even more important because folks are living longer. So you have more than one generation that a ranch or farm is trying to provide for.
Right.
Sometimes in our case, we actually have 3 or 4 generations that are hovering around.
Exactly.
And so you deal with not only personalities, but money, with health, with how to do stuff, with change. Do we want change? Do we not want change?
And you all have to agree on that
yeah.
and figure out what you changes you make and how you make
Right.
them and where you put their money towards that.
Yeah. And so that's, a lot of people call it succession planning. I don't like that word because it sounds like somebody's trying to supersede over somebody else. And it's to me, it's more of a transition. How do you become engaged and respectfully have these really hard conversations? Because the more clear you are, the more loving those conversations can be, and they can come from a sense of understanding and clarity. And then, this idea that, okay, can we all find a way to succeed? Because ultimately, isn't that the goal? We want to succeed and still be a unit. And so, in addition to all the things we've talked about today, that's probably one of the most challenging, trying, and difficult for many.
Oh, absolutely. And I think a lot of those transitions are happening right now, and nobody really knows exactly how to deal with them because you have this thing called technology that's kind of taken over here too. So you have a lot of technological advances as far as the internet and the social media and everything like this that I think younger generations think they want to implement, but they don't really know how to implement it to make it actually work for. And then you have some of the older generations going, no, we'll never do any of that with them. I'm going to stick with my flip phone,
Exactly.
So it's an interesting transition period. It's sad to me because I think because of social media and the way that we operate, you can now see other people's lifestyles. So when you're raised on a ranch, you see. Before, you just saw that lifestyle. Now you're seeing, wow, this person's making all this money and they're not doing any, they're not working near this hard. They're not broken down and they're not doing this and they're not doing that. But so they're seeing, the next generation is seeing that there's ways to do this easier, but they don't want to give up. They know once you give up that, and I'm talking from kind of experience. It was very difficult for me to step away from my dad's horse leasing business. Like I knew that was what I wanted to do, but once you do it, it's not really going back. You're saying, I'm going to let you have this,
right?
And that's very hard as far as a family structure and yourself. And so dealing with your kids in that is very difficult. You have to let them go, but still make sure that, help them along. And how much do you step in and not step in? And it's really
very hard. We're facing that with our son, our youngest of 4 kids, who's 21, and he loves the farm and loves to be a cowboy. He's done it since boy. But he also understands the massive hardship. And so he went to school, learned how to weld, and started his own welding company, making more money than we here in 1 month.
Right.
And is he, and
Exactly.
are we proud of him and are we supporting him? 120%. Do we hope that maybe one day, if there's still a ranch, will he come back? Absolutely. But so we're trying to kind of embrace that process a little bit. Is everybody in our family embracing the process? No. Does it cause some turmoil? Absolutely. How are we going to get through that? And then I think you go into legacy. What legacy are you wanting to children and grandchildren?
Right. And do they want it?
Right.
And if they really do, then how does that all work?
And I think what Vince and I have discovered is legacy. Yeah, there's a legacy connected with those generational ranches, with the Yellowstone Ranch that's being portrayed on the series. And we're passionate about that legacy, and that's one reason we're still engaged in that. But there's also a bigger legacy, and that's in and of yourself. How do you deal with those hardships, those hard decisions, those hard conversations? It's not about leaving your kids with even a piece of land or a nice set of china or a watch that you've had passed down through your 5 generations. It's not about that. It's about what you transition and leave them that came from kind of your heart and your soul. And that's what we're trying really hard to work on and do better at, that part of our legacy, because there's so many things that are out of our control.
Yeah.
But we can control how we respond.
Exactly. Well, discussing what a ranch actually is. I mean, so when I post a video, there's a lot of people, or not even posting a video, just running into people. I have a ranch or had a ranch or something like that. And what they mean is they had 40 acres and a couple of cows or a horse. So when we talk about ranching, we're not talking about that. We're talking about like what would you say to like what difference between a ranch and a farm
or a small acreage operation?
Or small acreage operation.
Yeah, I mean, usually you're looking at hundreds of cows, up to thousands of cows, I would say, and thousands of acres. That's generally what I think about. Now, is it the John Dutton size? No. But I would think, you've got a lot of ranchers that have anywhere from 200 to 600 head of cows and operate within 4,000 to 10,000. There's probably a lot of that. And that's kind of, do those small acreage folks matter? Absolutely. And some of those are honestly, maybe you could learn a lot from those small acreage folks on how they manage their property. We have one in Townsend that we utilized for an educational thing on how to have horses on smaller acreage. They have like 4 or 5 different they're not paddocks because they're grass, and they move their horses every few days, and they live off that grass almost through the entire winter.
That's pretty amazing in Montana. Yeah.
Because they've done such a great job that they've improved the grass and the crop that's there, and those horses, those 2 or 3 horses, and all summer they just move them and irrigate behind them and just keep them going and move the water tanks, and it works great. So they all matter, but generally when we speak of ranch, that's probably what I think of.
So why do you think, because most people don't have acres, acres of land, right? So why would you say it's necessary for a rancher to have 4,000 to 10,000 acres and 600 head, 200 to 600 head of cattle? Why would that be an important thing?
Right. And with that, that's why so many of us lease ground. Because we don't have enough acreage. So we either lease or have federal or state permits that help us to be able to have the number of cattle. And, so much of our land in Montana is not irrigatable land. And if it is irrigatable land, it is farmed, right?
Right.
So for our cows or sheep, the sheep farmer, but for those, we need rangeland, and we need rainfall, snowfall, and good management of that rangeland. And most do not have enough acres to sustain those AUMs or numbers of animals. So they either lease from other landowners, or fortunately, in our case, we have a phenomenal forest permit, which, just so the audience knows, those permits are at grave risk of being taken away also.
Yes. And so forest permits, means you have a permit that allows you to graze cattle on national forest ground.
Right. And
or a set number of
for a set number of days through the summer, and we make a payment on that, and we have to do as the Forest Service tells us.
Which is a lot.
It's a lot. Yeah. And we're very fortunate in our county. We have a great range conservationist. So, but we have to maintain fences. We have to put water stock system. We have to maintain those. We have to go on when they say, we have to go off when they say, and generally move when they say. And, it's, I don't want it to sound like it's this domineering situation. It's a lot of work, but it's some of the best land we have. And so we're very grateful. Could we run as many cattle as we run today on our ranch without it? No, it would probably cut our herd in half. So it's imperative that we have that. So it's also imperative that we manage that well and don't do a disservice to the federal land.
Right.
So we are doing our best job to do well by it. And I think we are. Because
just to make it clear, if you don't have, and like if you abuse that land, that permit, then the next year you don't have as many cattle in there. So you're incentivized to not.
You are incentivized. And in fact, we had another person that also had a permit, and he lost it. They took it away because he abused it, not necessarily on how he was utilizing it, but he was putting on more critters than he was legally allowed to do. So he lost the permit. He got taken off. This year, because of the drought and because of all the fires we had last year, we've already been warned. You can go on at the same time, but be ready. You might have to come off a month early or more. If the grass is not holding up, you're going to have to pull them out. And then we're going, okay, what are we going to do then?
Now, that means a very different situation because all ranchers have that kind of set out. Like, I have this many cows and they need this much pasture for the year, right?
And so you plan ahead, and you know that, look, for us, we have till early October, and those cows are going to be on there. And so then we're haying all summer. Well, we've already had to graze one massive hayfield spring just to get us till we could go that are on our mountain ground because everything was so late.
Mm-hmm.
So we're already kind of in a hay struggle on top of it. And we actually sold off some pairs in May because we
downsizing a little bit. Yeah.
It's been a really hard situation. And a lot of people don't understand when you sell cows that you're faced with capital gains taxes that it can almost do you in. Now, granted, because of the reason we sold, I believe we have 2 or 3 years to either buy back that same number of cows or do some improvements with equipment. But, you have all these tax implications too. So then they wonder why ranchers are stressed and depressed.
Oh, yeah.
And aging before their time.
Because you're worried about when the next rainstorm is going to happen, or what, how many, because that makes such a big difference.
It does.
As we're speaking, our county is now not in too big of a problem, but just to the north of like Great Falls, all that whole area all the way up to the High Line is not getting the moisture. So they are really in tough shape as far as grass goes.
And then south of us, they got hit with this massive flood through the Yellowstone Valley and Stillwater River and Fishtail and Red Lodge and Gardner. I mean, look at the implications they faced from that.
Too much water.
Oh, it's terrible.
It's like feast or famine. But so one of the things about so you have 200 to 600 head of cattle, right? How many cattle does it take to sustain a family, do you think? I mean, it's very relative here because if it depends on where and how you're raising cattle. In Montana, we have the winter, so there's a large period of time when you really can't graze them. Right.
And a large period of
time. If you're in Texas when they're not having a drought or something, you can graze them all year round. So it's a lot less cost into the cattle. But generally speaking, in Montana, do you have any idea of what? I mean, it really depends. It depends so much on the type of ground that you have.
I know. That's what I was just going to say, because if you look at Southeast United States, they have so much rain that they can have a lot more cattle on this small acreage and do really well, where it takes us a lot, thousands of acres to do the same thing that they get to do because they have more rainfall.
Exactly.
So for us, and your grasses are totally different.
Totally different.
You might have a little Idaho fescue or rough fescue out there, and the cow has to have hundreds of acres, and that varies. It depends on your.
And so what she's talking about here is that every year you make a certain amount on a cow. So a cow has a calf, well, unless the calf dies. But let's say the cow, every year a cow has a calf and you sell the calf. The profit margin is how much you had to put into that cow in a year. So in Montana, it's going to be more because you have to feed hay for a certain amount of time because of the winter. So whereas like if you were raised the same cow on a piece of property where you can graze it all year, your cost, let's say, is going to be $300. I'm just throwing numbers. Yeah. $300, and you sell it for $400, you get $100 profit. Here, it's like $375, and you're selling it for $400 because the price doesn't change. So then you get $25 profit. So you have to have more of them to be able to make the same amount of money.
Right. And the other thing that I find interesting, and this is another thing where ranchers just aren't sharing. People don't understand that, in reality, ranchers, for the most part, get one paycheck a year.
Yeah. You have to live on that
paid
all year.
Once for the entire year to operate on. And that's when we sell our calves. And we personally sell our calves in October. And so then we live on that money, our ranch does, for that entire year. Now, are there other forms of income? Yeah, that's what ranchers do, is come more forms of income and diversifying. So on good hay years, we can sell some of our hay. We raise all of our own hay for our cattle, but if we have good crops, we can sell some of that, which is huge. Some years we plant grain and we can sell that grain. My husband used to be a pickup man for 20 years at rodeos. That's how he made a little money. He used to be a hunting guide for 20 years. He made a little bit of money. I worked in town for 15 years. That's how we always are trying to figure out how to make ends meet. The joy would be to get to a place where you're not struggling to have those ends meet because there's only so many hours in a day, right?
So if you go take a job in town, you're not doing something on the ranch. Right. That's the problem. Is something's not getting done.
Something suffers, right?
Yes. Yeah. Something has to suffer.
Yeah. So we're trying to kind of figure that out. Now, in our case, we've got my in-laws and my husband and I, and then we currently have one hired hand. We used to have our son-in-law and his family a little bit more, and our family is great about helping us on big work days, whether it's shipping or cat branding or moving cows, whatever. But most of us have had to diversify or have other part-time jobs. My husband used to drive truck. He'll drive truck for people to haul their cows. He has a semi, so you're constantly doing other things. We're trying to direct sell some beef. We're trying to expand that to maybe have some retreats. I mean, you're always thinking about other ways to help complement what you have. But again, there's only 24 hours in a day and you're already strapped. So how could we work more efficiently and more effectively and not necessarily smarter, because then that makes it sound like the ranch.
You're working dumb. Yeah. You're working smarter. You're just trying to, it's trying to squeeze the goose for a little bit more because it's just not the whole lot there.
It ain't working fully.
Right. So when you talk about direct sell beef, what do you mean by direct sell beef?
So, so there's a number of folks that, because we're already raising our critters already. So why not raise them, finish them, find butchers that are more local or within a couple hours from here, have them process those animals for us, and then we sell them direct from us to you, the customer, instead of
the actual meat, right?
Yeah, the actual meat, already packaged, frozen up, ready to go. And so there's a lot of people that are working on that, and we are doing that same thing. We're on a big transition with that this summer, so it's been a huge learning curve.
Well, it's a lot different. So just to explain to everybody, I mean, normally when you raise cattle and you sell them to market in October, you're only raising the calf for 6 months or 8 months, and you're selling it, or maybe 10 months.
About 9, yeah.
Yeah, and then, but to finish, what you mean to finish, that means take them in a, you have them as a yearling, and then you put them in a feedlot and finish them out with corn or something to get some fat in there. That takes a year and a half.
Yeah, you're looking at a lot of people spend an extra 30 to 90 days past that, that year and a half point to then get that animal, instead of selling them like we do to often a middleman who then is doing the work for these big feedlots,
right?
Most likely in Minnesota, Nebraska, wherever Iowa. Yeah. And so most of our herd goes through that middleman to those big feedlots, and they're shipped from our ranch to those in October.
and that is a huge difference to a rancher, because now you're talking about to even transition to that. Now you only you have 9 months into one calf first, so you're getting a paycheck in 9 months. Where if you go to direct selling beef, meaning you're selling the meat to the actual customer, that means you have to not get paid, and you have to put more money into it for then 2 years.
Another half a year or 2 years,
almost a full 2 years, roughly, before you even get paid for that cow. So you wonder why you were talking about. Wonder why ranchers are stressed when you only get paid once a year. So you get a lump sum of money, and then you're living on that money, and you're watching it dwindle. Because I've done this, so you're watching it dwindle down, and everything you have is betting that next year will be as good or better than the last year. And if it isn't, then you have to live on less or go in the hole for the next
borrow,
year. And it's like a never-ending cycle. So, and it's one of the things that you kind of have to do, I guess, as a rancher, is to kind of diversify into this direct selling beef. But it's very difficult because you didn't make any more on the year that you're saving these calves from.
Right. In fact, you're struggling because you don't have the sell of that calf at the time that you're used to operating on. Like you said, you're going to earn more money.
Different facilities.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to have a place to feedlot these cows and run yearlings on top of the cows that you already have, and it's a much more, but you're hoping to get enough at the end, right?
Yeah, you're not only hoping to increase your profit margin for yourself, because why do it if it's just a ton more work?
Yeah, that wouldn't be worth it.
That doesn't make sense, right?
Right.
But also you're hoping to do two other things, and that is to, one, provide a good quality product for that consumer, because you want them to eat beef, you want them to eat good veggies, you want them to be healthy. And if you and they believe that beef is an intricate part of that, okay, I'm going to provide you something that you can trust, how it was raised, where it was grown, where it was harvested, how it was cared for and loved for. And a lot of blood, sweat, and tears go into those animals. Family operations put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in that. But also, you're wanting to simultaneously educate the greater public that cows are not bad.
Right. And that's an issue that we have right now.
It's a big issue.
Yeah.
A lot of misconceptions, a lot of false advertising, a lot of negative education that is not based on reality. Are there some reasons that those things have happened, from maybe some not so good situations? Sure.
And is there bad ranchers? Yeah. Absolutely. Every industry has bad people in it. There's something going on in the country for the last 20 years that tries to lump groups of people together. Right. And it's very difficult to see because there are horrible ranchers and farmers and landowners and individuals. There's people that just don't do things right. And they make a bad name for everyone in that particular group.
Just like there's bad organizations like PETA and the Humane Society and DEQ and EPA. I've worked a lot with DEQ at my job, and I used to go around and say, you're kind of the swear word. But are there great people at DEQ? Sure. Absolutely.
Right.
So the only way you can work through those difficult situations with PETA, the Humane Society, or the rancher down the road, or the butcher industry or whatever, is okay, let's keep an open mind, an open concept, and be transparent and deal with reality. And so I think in that direct sell of those products, and with the internet and social media, it is providing a better opportunity for those of us. I can tell you're super passionate about, this is why you're doing what because you care about it. So you're trying to help the general public understand what reality is compared to the Yellowstone drama series.
Right.
What reality is for the butcher industry, or for those raising cows and those that are eating meat, or those that don't want to eat meat. That's fine.
They don't have to eat meat.
They don't have to. But there's a lot of things that come from a cow other than meat, beef.
Yes.
And so,
so many things.
Yeah. So
I should have a list of those.
I know.
I'm going to name that. I'm going to make a video and make that list out.
Yeah.
But one of the things I will clarify here, when you say that the Humane Society, this is one thing people do not realize, is there's two humane societies. There's the Humane Society that is the shelter company, that local shelters. If you look it up on the internet, there's a Humane Society where you can go down and adopt a dog. And there's the National Humane Society. They're not even the same group. The National Humane Society doesn't do anything with a dog or any pet or animal whatsoever.
Your dog just growled.
Yes, I know. He's wanting out. The only thing they do is try to make it miserable for people. Oh, sorry. I'll let him out.
Oh, it's so timely. He knows we're talking about him.
Yeah. You can look this up. It's
interesting.
All they do is legislate. The National Humane Society is just a legislation arm, which is not even connected to the other thing. So when you say, when we talk about Humane Society, there's the Humane Society and then there's the Humane Society.
Interesting.
And they'll even advertise on the Humane Society's website, like the local shelter's website, but it's not even the same thing.
Wow. Yeah. So a lot of falsities, a lot of propaganda, I would call it.
And a lot of money to be made.
And a lot of money, yeah.
Because I think as ranchers don't speak up and educate the public, they're being educated. They're being educated by the people in the cities who don't understand this stuff at all, never lived the lifestyle. And they're the ones that are trying to dictate what happens out here without really understanding it.
Yep, exactly.
So I think it's really our responsibility to start to at least educate. You can make up your mind. I'm not saying I'm trying to force somebody to think something.
Oh.
I just want them to understand some of the reality of what happens. And then they can decide from there what they,
Right. Yeah, but wouldn't it be better, and you're helping to do that, wouldn't it be better instead of just dealing with the Campbell Soup lettered agencies, whoever they are, and it's nothing against them, or government, why would you not go deal with the common layperson, the people that are actually living those lives, to try to understand both the pros and the cons, the good and the bad.
Learn from them instead of you should.
Them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I don't know if we have time for this, but you kind of led to this my other soapbox.
Okay.
Because I used to work for the Forest Service, and we work with the Forest Service, and we're very fortunate here. We have a great Forest Service community. And I care very much about the forest lands, not just for our cows, but for the wildlife, and to go on pack trips and go take our horses into the lakes and fish and all those things.
Experience the outdoors.
I love it.
Yeah.
Love
in the public areas.
That's a vacation for me.
Yeah.
To go to Disney World, last place I want to go.
I went there.
Yeah.
I had so much fun that I never need to go back.
Never need to go back. Yeah. But you'll go on a pack trip with your horse up into the mountain lakes anytime. Well, that's how I am. So, there's so much federal lands that because they're unable to harvest the trees because they're being litigated to death.
Absolutely.
So now all those trees are falling on the ground that not a person can't go there, a cow can't go there.
Most wildlife can't use it.
Most wildlife can't use it. So now it's being basically decimated. Then you also have the other policy where our state had to go through this quite a few years ago, where Washington, D.C. said, I'm looking on the map and I see too many roads on the Forest Service, so you need to go decommission the roads.
Right.
And we said, well, why can't you just put a gate or a berm of dirt or drop a couple trees so they don't use the road, but you keep the road, so if there's a fire.
So you can use it for fire mitigation.
Fire mitigation, rescue somebody, whatever the reason is, leave the road. Plus, there's currently, it's in good standing. There's either grass that's grown in. A lot of those roads were inundated with trees that you couldn't even use it. So just leave it alone. Leave well enough alone. No. We need to get those roads off our map that we're looking on. We've never come out to Montana and seen it. But we need those roads off the map. So you need to take a big piece of equipment in there and just chew it up. So now you can go up onto the Forest Service where you used to go into Edith Lake, and you can't even go on the trail because they brought that huge masticator in and they chewed it up. And now the wildlife don't even have a trail down it.
Right.
And now guess what is there? Weeds.
Right. Because they chewed up all the seeds.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it looks horrible.
That's another. It's one of the things about just not really. They think people want to save something, but very often when you go to save something, you either destroy the thing you're trying to save or you destroy something else.
Yep.
And it's very difficult to just say, "Oh, this needs to happen," without understanding all the implications for what that does all around it. And yes, I think actually that's a topic that I would like to get into and discuss in detail, because I think it's a major one, the litigation problem that causes this stuff, in Montana. And I would like to discuss, the problems that we have with predators. And there's all kinds of issues that we're dealing with in Montana because of, in my opinion, outside influence trying to dictate how we utilize land. And one of the ways they can do that is by demonizing the cattle and the cattle industry. So, question about the cattle industry. You're direct selling you're trying to direct selling some of it. We're
still doing the usual, but we're
trying to transition some over that. Right. I don't know. People will have to tell me, how important is it, do you think, for people to know where their beef comes from? Do we really know when you go down to the store? Is this beef that's raised around here? I mean, do we even know that?
Right. Most likely not, unless it's specifically labeled as such. And I do know of at least one store in Helena, Montana, where they do label it and say where it is raised. There's a sign up. So great.
Yeah.
Is all the beef that you get from the store bad, or was it raised bad? No. But you can often, like for example, a package of burger, it's not, rarely if ever is that going to be from one critter. It's going to be from a menagerie of a lot of critters. Were they all treated the same? Were they all, super healthy? Were they all good quality meat? We don't know that. Were they from United States? Probably not. Maybe they were.
A lot of them come from Argentina and
South America.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and there's so many things that are tied to that, and there's so much politics tied for that. So, if you're at peace going and buying the meat at the store, at Costco or wherever, go ahead, do that. I mean, is there good meat? Yeah. Are you helping somebody? Yeah. And I think most direct sell folks aren't trying to negate people going to the store.
They're not trying to destroy the meat market in this store.
It's more like, you know what, we're trying to cut out some steps to provide a more fluid process from us to the consumer. And that will hopefully in turn not only help that consumer, but help us.
Right.
And provide, we think, at least in our situation, a more healthy, pleasant process, not only for us and the consumer, but for the animal. And that's kind of important too, because we want to be good animal stewards and we want to take good care of the land. And so if we can incorporate all of that in a more open, transparent process,
then you know exactly what happens to that animal all the way until it's butchered, not just in that first part of its life, right?
It's kind of like this massive farmers market. I love farmers market, and here you get these people that are raising veggies and making jams and pies, and they're trying to provide it for you, and they care so much about it, and here you go, and it's a more personal thing. I just think that's incredible. That's one of my favorite parts of selling beef. I just went and delivered some to a customer before I came up to you. I got to meet this new lady that just moved here from Oregon. Super cool, and we just really connected. I love, and that's what I love about social media, is it puts you in touch in a more personal way with the people in your lives, or that you would like in your life, or that want to be in your lives.
Yeah.
That's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, basically, people have the right to move here. I find it funny that, because I've heard some politicians recently saying, well, we're just going to stop them all from, vote for me because we're going to stop everybody from coming here. You can't, unless you totally eliminate everybody's freedom, you're not going to stop them from coming here. You have to, in my opinion, you need to protect the land. You need to protect who the stewards of the land are. That's my personal opinion. I don't think you can do it by a government subsidy. I think that helps somebody out of a jam sometimes, but it's not a long-term fix. It doesn't help the land stay in that ranch. And I believe there is a place for public land, but the government can't run everything. They can't manage the whole, state of Montana, not discounting where the food's going to come from if you take it all and put it into public land. But I think private property is one of the best resources we have for managing or continuing to keep land open and free of developments and anything that might disturb the way it looks right now.
Yeah.
There is another issue with this. As I'm talking about this is one that I'm not sure what the answer is here. I think you have to make it so the ranchers can make more money, or we will lose all of our property. And when we'll lose it, we'll either lose it to the next topic, which is very wealthy people who buy up huge ranches and farms, and then the other is development. So now we can understand the development part. I actually build houses, so it's not like I'm against people building houses. I'm in it because that's where the money's into that industry right now. But that doesn't mean I want to see houses everywhere. I want to see it managed and some of this land kept for our children and our grandchildren to see. So what talking about though, the big money is coming to Montana, and they're buying up huge ranches, massive ranches, 50,000, 100,000, 20,000 acre ranches. And then do you see them managing it the same way as like a family operation?
In rare situations, but most likely no. They are often more for, more of the wildlife thing, and that's okay, but generally no. But there are probably situations where, and plus, if a wealthy person buys, let's say, an adjoining ranch to you, and you had been leasing that ranch for 4 generations, are you going to be able to lease that wealthy person? Probably not. So that's going to take some more land out of production for ag, even if it's for just a cow to eat the grass, So it does make changes. It does have negative implications. Have all wealthy people done a disservice to these big ranches? No.
Okay, so we were talking about the super wealthy people that are buying up a ton of ground. One of the things that I see that they do with it, number one, they eliminate any access that was there for the public most of the time. I mean, most of the time there's a lot of ranches that don't allow any access to the public, which is their prerogative. It's their land. But there's a lot that do, and then in at least a limited fashion. But that pretty much eliminates all of it when you have somebody... Oh, go ahead. Somebody that purchased it with a lot of money. And the other thing they do is they usually maintain the wildlife, but they don't let anybody access to wildlife. And then they don't raise near as much as far as beef or anything else, livestock on that ground. So you have a lot less ground. And that's very arguable as far as how good that is for the land.
Yeah.
They're huge. They're conglomerations of very wealthy people that tie up a whole bunch of land and then really don't run any cattle on mostly.
And a lot of those are being funded by other countries too. People from other countries.
Yes, a lot of those are.
And there's a big concern, and it doesn't necessarily mean that there's all pros and cons with it. Generally, there's good and bad with everything, but it's you got to have an understanding. You have to try to be educated on it. And do I see a shift from what I considered a stable, humble, productive, wholesome situation to something less that? Yeah. Concerning? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, our state, and I would say most of the West, has transitioned once drastically. Okay. And you can't ever, in my mind, it doesn't help to sit there and say how, I wish it would have been different. You can't. It's impossible to do that.
Right.
You can't go back to the way it was.
Right.
So as you let things slip, you can learn from the past and say, do you want to let things go the same way and transition again into something completely different, like a European style way of land ownership, which is completely different, where the government basically controls almost all of your property, And I think it's wise to at least look at this stuff and see, is there a way to transition without losing
that very thing that we're trying to
the very
protect.
thing we're trying to trust?
That's the big question.
Because once it happens, you're not going to go back to it. You're not, and it's just not going to happen. And it won't help you, anybody, to sit there and lament what happened.
No.
It won't change how. So you have to, we're in the middle of it right now.
Right.
So we have a chance, I think, to change the course of what's happening as long as we're awake.
Right.
While it's happening.
Right. And our conservation district is kind of, we're having those discussions right now. So like, what are some things that citizens, landowners, and agencies can do to kind of, whether it's to protect our ag land or open space or have wise development? What are some things that we can put in place that have some teeth? Can we can go comment to the county commissioners and the planning board, but that's not going to necessarily change anything. But what could we do to enact something that has some teeth? Yes, it's going to require voter approval. Is that going to be easy? No. Are we going to give it a whirl? I think we are, because, as many people know, we're a headwaters state. We're a crucial water system for the entire United States.
Yeah, what she means by headwater state is the water starts here. It starts on the Continental Divide, which runs right through Montana. And the Missouri River starts here. The Yellowstone River starts here, which feed into the Mississippi, and
ultimately into the Missouri. Then it feeds into the Columbia. Is it the Columbia that goes to the west? Is it the Columbia?
Yeah, the Columbia on the other side.
That starts
other side of the divide.
Montana.
We have
the one that
over there,
goes
the
into the Hudson, that flows into the Hudson Bay from Glacier Park. They all start here. And
the Clark Fork and the Blackfoot and everything, they end up in the Columbia River, which goes to the
Pacific Ocean.
So that all that water, she means the headwaters, is they all start right here in Montana. It's one of the main areas where water flow that the rest of the country depends on comes from. So if we don't manage this correctly, you have problems all the way downstream.
Everywhere. Right. Yeah. And, we have kind of this really cool ecosystem when you look at Yellowstone Park and Glacier Park, all the open prairie land that we have, it's super unique to our state. And so do we want to trust the government or big corporations to take care of that? Or do we want the people that have been vested in that for generations, and how can we have a balance and ultimately preserve and protect that while also doing justice to that and just not neglect it?
Right.
And I don't know all the answers. Do I want to listen to their ideas? Sure. But it's going to take a conversation, and it's going to take people looking at the big picture, and it's going to take people caring, genuinely caring about it.
Well, here's the biggest question to me, because I feel that if you educate people, I might be wrong, but I feel if you educate people about what ranchers do and how they protect the land and everything, and I think Yellowstone is waking people up to this, like they do protect the land, that you might be able to convince the people that ranching is okay, or at least a large majority of them. But how do you keep the children that are growing up in agriculture? Because I can't go buy money is money, right? I can't go buy a ranch and start ranching, right? You'd have to pay such an astronomical fee for the land that you could never make it pay with ranching. So basically, to keep that land the way it is, you have to have those children then decide to stay and ranch. And I see more and more of that not happening. There's possibly people who would want to start ranching legitimately. I mean, a lot of people say they do, but they don't have any idea what it actually takes to ranch. But I don't even know how to fold those people in at all.
I know.
You're not going to hey, why don't you come on my family farm and take it over? Because you can't sell it to them.
No, because they couldn't afford it.
They couldn't afford it.
And they would never make their money back.
Exactly.
Right?
So if they could afford it, they would never make any of their money back. So they'd have to be millionaires to begin with.
Right. Yeah.
That's the question that is really tipping me. It's like the demand is there for the land, so it's bringing the price way up.
Mm-hmm.
So you either got to keep the family there or provide a way for new families to be able to farm and ranch. And I'm not sure exactly what that process is to keep the land the way. Otherwise, it's going to go to either rich people or development.
Right.
There's no other way to go.
And rarely, if ever, do you have somebody say, hey, I know you really want my ranch, and so I know I could get this much money for it, but because I care about my ranch and I care about you and I know you'll tend to it like I did or even better, I'm going to sell it to you at that value.
Yeah. I mean,
is that going to happen on
no.
average? No. Is there one or two situations? It's definitely a minority, and that's super cool. And maybe we need to pursue and find out who those people are.
That's right. If I found one, that'd be an interesting conversation.
That'd be a cool story, wouldn't it? Yeah. And I'm, like I said, I'm an addict to the Yellowstone series. I love it. And I know there's a lot of, icky stuff that goes on with it, but I'm a Kevin Costner fan and I love Montana and I love ranch life. So Vince and I are suckers for it. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry to say, but, it is nice to see some of those things either, brought to light. Are they adequately and fully accurately brought to light? No, but at least it's giving some sense to that. Is it also having a negative effect? Yeah, I'm sure it is, but what doesn't? I mean,
everything does and doesn't. It's, I wish they would have made it cleaner so you could have actually enjoyed the thing
and have your
more.
children watching it. And,
but they are, in my mind, they are at least bringing some of the real story, whether they intend to or not, I don't know. But the real struggle that's going on, there's like a super battle going on right now for this land.
Well, kind of like the easements, the easements and being able to take over somebody's land to like build a highway or put in a man-made lake or all of those things, or a conservation easement to protect open space. There's all this stuff that's going on. And so how can we kind of latch on to those educational tidbits and bring the reality to, which is what you're doing, which I credit you for that. I think that's super cool how you've kind of maneuvered through that. And I think it's going to have a good positive impact. And, all we can do is hope that maybe the general public gets to the point of being kind of sick and tired of being sick and tired of the hogwash, icky. And you know what? We need to get back to some of these basic cornerstone principles, whatever those are, because I'm not going to preach to some. Different for everybody, but what are those cornerstone principles that have, one, done justice to our lands, and two, done justice to our families? And if we can kind of focus on that, that's maybe a good place to start anyway.
I mean, I guess in my mind, again, is just trying to get out there no, this isn't actually true. This isn't the way it works, right? You think it works this way because you go down to the grocery store and buy your beef, but this is not how it actually works. And I think the challenge there, which is making something entertaining. People have such a short attention span. I mean, short. Yeah. So you have to keep something entertaining at the same time that you educate them. And that's the tricky part.
Yeah. But, yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, luckily there's passionate folks like you that can articulate that well and get the word out and keep doing our darndest, right?
That's right. Well, I really appreciate you being on here with me. I really do.
Asking me.
Your family, by the way, is doing the direct selling of beef. So if you want what is the name of your company, or have you decided yet?
Yeah, because our ranch is Thompson Ranch, but we're actually doing a whole separate entity, logo, name, and everything. And that'll be out this actually.
Oh, well, good.
I'll let you know that.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Denise. Again, we're talking about ranching and the problems that we have in Montana and some of the good things and the bad things, just the struggles that we deal with on a daily basis in Montana. So if you have any questions, make sure you leave them in the comments and I will be sure to reply to them either in another podcast or a video or in the comments themselves. And until next time, God bless.